And I realized in that moment how close so much of our urban history is. The chain is short from founder to historian. But I think that closeness has made it easier for Seattle to demonstrate a kind of contempt for the past. The pioneers mostly came here to escape history and class systems and racial turmoil in the East. In 1962, Robert F. Kennedy came to Seattle for the World's Fair. And speaking to downtown business leaders, he extolled Seattle's commitment to the new frontier. Our eyes on the horizon, not behind us. And looking out at his audience, he said, quote, "This is the spirit of the Pacific Northwest and the pioneer America, the unceasing search for new frontiers. And it is, I may perhaps add, particularly refreshing to come from the other Washington to a region of the country which is not mired in the past, not constantly looking backward over its shoulder, not timidly content with the status quo, not weighed down by doubt and foreboding, not fearful of the future, but instead peering boldly and joyfully ahead to the 21st century." Seattle was being lauded for thinking of history as a burden, a dead weight to be thrown out along the Oregon Trail, like an old piano the oxen could lug over the mountains. By the way, lest you think that only my child self grew up assuming nothing happened here, so did many others. When the World's Fair launched in April of 1962, Time magazine ran a story saying it was the biggest thing to happen in the Northwest since Lewis and Clark, neatly erasing most of the 19th and 20th century story, let alone the Cree contact it past. Seattle in the Northwest is a place of reinvention, like much of America, except we went from wilderness to metropolis faster and more recently than most. Our civic building focused on commercial activities and immediate reward. Our planning saw the virtue of a blank slate. When George Vancouver sailed through Puget Sound in 1792, he saw Seattle's landscape as having potential as a bucolic agrarian paradise like old England. When the Denny party arrived, they saw New York Alcott. We leveled the hills, lowered Lake Washington, connected it to the sea, straightened the Duwamish, built a man-made island, filled in the vast delta tide flats, washed away the inconvenient hills, and imposed a grid upon a landscape that seems almost designed to defy grids. If you haven't picked up a copy of David Williams' new history about Seattle's terraforming, Too High and Too Steep, please do. It's an epic story of engineering, hubris, and transformation, and environmental devastation, as a matter of fact. He suggests Seattle's symbol should be the pile driver. Physical changes were not enough. We expelled Native Americans from the city. Then we expelled the Chinese. Then we interned the Japanese. One of our early mayors, Bariah Brown, was a Southern sympathizing Copperhead during the Civil War who attempted to set up an all-white colony in Mexico. Prior to the war, the Civil War, many settlers on the West Coast wanted to secede and start a Pacific Republic that would truly leave America behind. Many of its proponents were pro-slavery and hoped to ally with the Confederacy. Oregon, we must remember, is the only state with a racial exclusion clause in its constitution, admitted to the Union with that clause in its constitution, banning blacks and those of mixed race. Oregon and California both opposed the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution and didn't ratify them until the Civil Rights era, nearly 100 years later. We became a grab bag of utopian fantasies, and even now the Northwest is rife with secessionist dreams. Ecotopia, Cascadia, the compounds of neo-Nazis in Idaho, cults, encampments. The dream of starting over is still compelling, and thousands of individuals experience it every day, moving here for a fresh start or to work in a tech industry that purports to usher in new visions of tomorrow. the rhetoric of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Our ancestors came here for their own individual reasons, but collectively the effect was to foster a culture devoted to escaping history and starting anew. Back east, that was history's attic where you could leave your baggage, the baggage you hadn't already left behind in old Europe.